Okay, so one of the first things that we wanted to show everybody were the different positions that Aslan can possibly get. As you can see, again, we've got Grace in the rear position and Kieran in the heart position. I'm stepping in to work in the head position, so that way you can see how he may possibly move up here as well. So within here, we've got the first is a sitting position. So what Grace does is Sam, you can move around a little bit.
Okay.
Come over to here and see, Grace is taking a kneel right now. You see she's leaning forward just a little bit. Kieran naturally has to kind of bend his knees. Just based upon the design, we found out that we needed to shorten him a little bit, so Kieran has to just like do his performance with bent knees almost the whole time. He's got like really like wicked quads right now. So at least in the standing position, they stand like this and the head can kind of move around. If we like to get a little higher so that it looks like he's investigating something, or if he wants to look a little lower, at one point he has to look at Peter in order to like knight him in Aslan style, then he can look down as well. Let's do a stand up from that position, okay? Okay, so as you can see, Grace just like stands up. You can have him all the way up. So Grace just needs to stand up. Now the coordination is one of the big things that we worked on. So let's go from, we're in the stand-up position right now, let's do a sit-down. So that way we can show the audience kind of what it looks like for him to lay completely down. Ready? Okay. So what we saw was that usually when felines go to sit down, a lot of times they'll kind of prep themselves with their front feet, but the back end is normally the end that goes first. So as you saw, Grace kind of like moved from one side to another, and then Kieran also went. The two of them actually have a really kind of attached relationship, because they like Kieran has to be able to feel Grace move through the spine. So when Grace does shift, when she leans forward and when she goes down, Kieran's able to feel the difference in weight and kind of in balance because Grace has shifted a little bit. Now if we want his head down so that way he's like laying down or something like that, I can adjust a little bit and have my hand under. Normally you can just let the weight happen like on the neck piece that we have right there. We can have him move up, and you can see that my hands, at least in the head position, I've moved my my kind of pole hand, we'll call it. I've moved that one up to be inside of the head, behind kind of the temple area, and then my right hand is still in the chin position. That still allows for kind of quick movements. These positions are positions that we had to be careful of at first, because when we were first making the mane had kind of sharper features to him, so we had Kieran wear goggles. So in the development, if you do end up making something similar to this, we recommend that actors, especially our puppeteers that are behind anything that's pointy, that they wear goggles in doing so, because we had to adjust the mane size in order to get positions like this, because he's not always going to have his hand up or his head up. He's going to change a little bit. Okay? All right, let's go from that position. Let's do the sit-up again. There we go, and then let's do a little walking. Okay, so what you're going to see is as Aslan moves, the legs we've coordinated with actual feline features around here. Now, as we move on the stage, a lot of times we found that we're making figure eights. The stage is quite big, and we're fortunate in that, but one of the limitations that we find with this character, and we'll come up right to here, was that because he's so large and because he has to interact with many people on the stage, when he did move, excuse that I'll put this position down, if you could just hold on to it really quickly, thank you. When he does need to move on the stage, you'll see that the patterns that he swings out on, he has to do what we call a swing out, where he swings out wider, and the head position has to do a lot of turning. Now what we ended up doing in order to make sure that Kieran knew where he had to go, and so that way Grace still had enough clearance, we actually taped down here on the stage what were like the safe positions. So here, this red position, the red line, was the line that Kieran used in order to know that in order for us to make a turn or to make sure that Grace was clear and that way actors could still get by him. His feet couldn't go past that red line. If his feet went past that red line, that meant that the extension from Kieran's heart position over to the tip of the nose didn't permit an actor to get by him comfortably. So we put that on the stage in order to help guide. So when Kieran was walking, it's kind of natural at this point that when he swings wide, he'll swing wide, come forward, and then come back down within that red line. And in addition to that, we also have a purple line here that helped Kieran know how far back he couldn't go. If he went further back than this, then Grace in the rear position would unfortunately hit part of our set. Now you can see that part of our set has been kind of deconstructed here for the sake of us having space to move about and do things a little bit more openly, but we put that there so that way Grace didn't have to move sideways or didn't have to renegotiate where her position was unnaturally. In addition to that, when we studied the movements of a lion, what we did was we first looked at a computer simulation of how a lion moves and compared it to an original lion's movement in order to make sure that they both matched up. We found the computer-generated lions were a lot easier to see as far as tempo goes when their feet hit. So Kieran, if you could, we're just gonna like kind of run in place, just to show them kind of what the rhythm was. Now, kind of like in dancing, normally the lead position, which will be the heart, we always start with the left foot in dancing, so we have the same thing start here. So Kieran's gonna go with the left foot, and you'll see how it kind of coordinates with Grace's feet as well. And you'll see what we discovered was that there's a slight kick from the back leg, but for the sake of Grace, because Grace, being the one that's able to see Kieran, she had to base her rhythm off of what he was doing. When we looked at the pattern between the two different legs, while it looks like both sides, the left side, like the back leg, tends to kick the front leg forward, what we also found was that when the front leg, specifically in this case the front left, when the front left meets its maximum position as far back as it can, that's usually the time that the opposite leg, in this case the rear right position, the rear right leg hits the ground. So as you see, Kieran kicks back and Grace lands on the opposite foot. And it ends up doing the same thing on the other side. So that way we get a natural lion's movement. And when we needed to speed things up, really the run within our scenes, we didn't see him running a ton, but we basically do a sped up version. It does change the pace a little bit because the contact of a walk is not the same contact as that of a run, but because running only goes from over here to here, we were able to simply speed things up and add a little bit of a gap between each of the legs, because when they're running, felines at some point their legs are both close together and then they're completely far apart, and at times can look like they're not on the ground at all, simply because they're pushing. So what we'll do is we'll do another walk around for you, and you'll be able to see what that swing looks like, and be able to see like kind of how we move as well, just so you get to see it in action. Now that you know kind of what the movement is. Okay, ready? The only thing that you may see that may not be visible from that camera, come on forward here. Within the inside, you can see that as Kieran moves, we're going to do another kind of run in place. You can see it close up. As Kieran moves, you can see that he's using the PVC pipe that we have here in order to help guide, and his movement is kind of a back up and forward, back up and forward, back up and forward. On this leg, you can see a little more prominently, we've got one of our rubber bands. This rubber band has come detached, but over here, we've got a rubber band that helps establish flick positions. So you can see that it has two different bolts that are here. Go ahead and slow that down for him. So you can see that we've got two bolts, one here and one here. One is attached to the forearm, and one is attached to the foot. So that way when he does lift it, go ahead and lift it, it gets a natural flick. So Kieran doesn't have to simulate that. It just naturally flicks into that position. And because we knew we were dealing with these rubber bands, we made that adjustment so that way we had the right kind of tension to ensure that when it does flick, it doesn't flick too quickly, but it also helps complete the motion, because as the character goes backwards, it's hard for Kieran to simulate him pushing and bending the foot in that manner, because he has to keep that up and forward position. While you're down here, you can also see that we've got joints. What we did was we established these are 1 inch number 20 bolts, or number 20 bolts with washers. We've got the bolt itself. We have a washer, and then between the two layers of Luan that we have, we've cut the legs in pieces, the backing at least, from Luan. We have 2 of these washers inside, and then on the other side of this piece, we'll see if we can peek inside here. Tell me if the light's okay on that. You can see that there's a little acorn on that side. Okay, that acorn is there partially because we want to make sure that we don't have a nut that continually screws in, because this foot needs to be able to freely move. So if we tightened it too much, that foot wouldn't move the way that it needed to. So you need something, if you are going to do something that moves like this, as far as a joint goes, you need some kind of nut or some kind of stop that doesn't go all the way in. So in this case, we decided to go with an acorn nut that we just kind of screwed onto the edge, and it just so happened to work out that it was like the perfect size. In addition to that, each joint, here I'll ask you to take that one. Let's take a trip back here to Grace. You can see that while Kieran's is mounted to the forearm over here, Grace, because she's in the rear position, has a different arrangement as far as her body goes. You can see that she's got a longer handle because her, it's basically what would be the cat equivalent of a shin. The shin over here is much lower and it's much smaller. So in order for her to be able to move it, we needed to have a longer handle. So Grace, if you could just show us how that works. She has a similar movement. As you can see, her hand is also moving up and forward. And she's got a little wrist flick involved in there as well in order to make sure that that foot goes forward and kind of has a little flick. She also has a rubber band built in to create that flicking to simulate pushing. And then in addition to that, in order to help her, you can stay there. In order to help her make sure that the leg wasn't moving too far past this position, what we did was we just built in these kind of rudimentary stops. These are just 2 inch number 20s. These do have a tightened nut, so that way this doesn't go anywhere. And you can see that it does start to eat away at the Luan a little bit, but we knew that we had a show that had to last 3 days, so we're kind of willing to deal with that. But if you do end up making something for a longer term, we recommend making some, perhaps like covering the bolt in order to make sure that it doesn't eat away at the Luan on the inside. Yeah, so it basically just stops this piece from moving any further, and it also keeps a natural position. We put these stops in at where a natural position would be for the character, because we wanted to make sure that when Grace went to move, and Kieran as well, that it didn't go further than that, because one of the things that we did experience, especially with the feet, is that they would naturally just kind of go out of place, and you had to really control a lot. So by putting those stops in, it makes sure that the leg can only go in that direction. We also have these blocks right here. We added those blocks because originally we had the pole attached straight to the Luan, but when we went to move, Grace's hands kept getting hit by the Luan here. So as a means of preventing that, we added those blocks in order to create a little bit of space between the Luan and Grace's fingers. And typically Grace during a performance would wear gloves in order to help her grip. You can also see that she's got a little thing built in here. And Grace, if you could show us how this guy works.
All right, so this was just a little idea I thought up with, because what I was thinking about is if you're performing and you accidentally drop the handle, it goes all the way down there and it's really hard to reach and you have to kind of kick it up and it looks kind of weird during a performance. So with a hair tie and some string, I'm a little tangled up in here. Let's see. Here we go. With that, you can just kind of... Yeah,
no, you're fine, you're fine. I just want to show.
It just kind of catches, so then you can just kind of reel it in with your hands and then grip it, and then you can adjust it off stage when you leave a scene, or even in the show, you can just kind of unravel it around your fingers. But it keeps it from like being way out of reach and you have to reach out, and it just kind of, it messes with the leg, and when the audience is trying to watch you, it just kind of, it ruins the magic a little bit. So we tried to avoid that.
And that's a unique position that Grace has to deal with, because with Kieran, because his movement pieces are attached a little bit higher, he doesn't ever have to worry about it leaving his hands. Because Grace's could possibly fall out, she ended up developing that little mechanism that allowed her to just quickly retrieve it, and it worked really well, because there were definitely times that it came out of your hand, or especially when she goes to stand up. I think sitting to standing, those were times when because when she moves, her movement causes shifting in the body. That body can move away from her, and if she tries to get it, then the body moves with her. That's a really nice little innovation there. In addition to that, because Grace is in the rear position, one of the disadvantages that we also saw was simply sightline. She needs to be able to see and be able to see comfortably. So as you can see, this is being shot right through where the belly of a cat would be. So if we back up a little bit, you can see that we've got the rib cage established here, but that rib cage is completely hollow. The rib cage itself was made by Grace and a few others. It's designed from L200. All we did was kind of round it out. The benefit of L200 was that Grace was able to heat shape all of this stuff. So she was able to kind of cup this into its kind of natural shape right now, and then she was also able to curve it. Now that curve is also supported. You can take a quick look under here. You can go in under the ribs. Is also supported by wire that we kind of found upcycling. It's a really good thing. But we found this wire, so we decided that in order to establish a slightly larger frame for him, because the L200 had the tendency to want to droop after a certain amount of time, what we did was we just kind of reinforced the inside with this kind of thin or thick but still bendable wire. It's very similar to what clothes hangers, wire clothes hangers are made out of, a little bit thicker than that. And then, as a natural theater person would do, we reinforced it with gaff tape, because gaff tape is the greatest tape known to man, and it already comes in the color black, and it sticks pretty well. So we can just stick that up in there, and that holds pretty well. You can see that there's some pieces that start coming out, but for the most part, if we just, before every show, just come in here and just push that back up in there, we really don't have to worry about that, those ribs coming apart, and they stay really reinforced. And even better, because Grace was able to get that L200 to a certain shape, these also help maintain a certain size for his abdomen, because one of the other limitations that we found with L200 as far as its bendability goes was that they would bend at different rates because of how we cupped it or how we shaped it or something like that. L200 is very flexible in some ways, and that flexibility we need to restrict. So what we did, we added that reinforcement, and it helped keep a consistent shape, so that way the ribs looked about the same size, they would encircle the same animal's abdomen. You can also see that we've covered up here with two different types of moss that we found at a craft store. It was originally colored black. We didn't necessarily like the color black. We thought that this added a little bit. He has a mane, so because he has a mane, we kind of continued this hair feature. You can see that it's also up here as well. So that way this can kind of continue in. We decided not to cover the neck because we didn't want to draw attention to the neck, because it is so mobile and because it's frequently in Kieran's face. In addition to that, while we're talking about the neck, you can see that the neck is divided up into multiple positions. This is where our spine attaches. So the dowel that has the legs attached runs completely through. We've got our T's that he's mounted to. We've got couplings that helps us mount it on and off and make sure that the dowel doesn't move anywhere. We've got the spine running through the middle, and then we had to build a bridge around the spine so that way the neck was still centered. Now this bridge is positioned up because originally when we had this design, the legs were slightly longer and these PVC pipes were high enough to clear Kieran's head. Coincidentally enough, because we had to cut the PVC pipes down in order to make the proportions of his legs a little bit more like feline appropriate. When we did that, we cut off enough that these PVC pipes alone would cause the head to hit him in the head. So it kind of worked out that we ended up having to build this bridge, and then the neck could attach to it and still keep centered. If you look inside of here, you can see that we've got wire that kind of keeps these parts attached. So we've got a T that goes through here, and then a smaller. So this one is a 1.5 or 1 1/4 inch pipe, and inside of that 1 1/4 inch pipe, we have a 3/4 inch pipe. So we've got about 1/2 inch worth of flex, and that allows the head to move back and forth here. Very similar to like those like toy snakes that we used to have back in the day. We've got that 3/4 inch extends all the way up into here, and then we've done basically the same thing on the other side, where we have another 1 1/4 inch pipe that feeds into the T, that also has kind of a connection piece. You see the wire was like brought through and then wrapped around as well. That wire was really, really valuable for us simply because we had a lot of times when we were putting screws into stuff, and for the safety of our puppeteers, we wanted to make sure that there weren't kind of random pointy things sticking out for them. So a lot of the screws that we originally had that were here and here and in here, we attempted to use pins, but the pins never worked. So we replaced them with wire that we were able to take through and wrap around. And by wrapping it around, it really ensures that it's not going to go anywhere. Now that same wire is also the wire, or at least some of the wire that we used in order to create the main. So you can see that the main has some of the green wire in here. We've also got clothes hangers that are kind of gaff taped together to get the shape that we want. And you can see that there's some loose pieces here. Now those loose pieces are actually the pieces that we used in order to cut off Aslan's mane. At some point the White Witch asks or demands that her followers cut off his mane. So we didn't want the whole mane to get cut off, but we needed something to give to the White Witch. So what we did was we created our own little vines from just dollar store leaves, and we put them all together, and then we have them hooked. They have like the great thing about the dollar store things is they have little hooks on them that allows them to just kind of hook onto one of the wires. This one's a little bit better looking, but you can see it comes off right there, just a little circle. But that circle, we just take that and we can just hook that on right there, and it stays on. And when the people need to take it off, they just kind of pull it off of its thing. It comes right off. I mean, and it's also nice for movement too, because you get a little bit of free movement. Allows the character to, like, have a little bit of weight to him as well. And all of this is kind of gaff taped inside. We originally saw that we were going to mount them in here, but we saw that the wires would spin. So in order to prevent the spinning, what we did was we made kind of an L shape. So you could see right here, for reinforcement, we attached the ones that originally were just going straight inside that are covered up by this piece of L200. They go in, they go, and they bend in 2 different places. By adding that bend there, that prevents this wire from spinning around, because while it was glued inside, it would spin, and the L200 would just stretch, because that's what the L200 does. So if there's any recommendation that I've got, is that if you end up putting anything that's wire, you need to make an L shape to prevent it from kind of turning over in place. If you want to stay in one place, make an L shape, make a kind of like a, I don't know what that is, 2 L's put together shape. And that'll make sure that it stays together, and you can reinforce. If I had to do it again, I would take these guys, make an L shape inside, and then seal a piece of L200 on top of it in order to make sure that it's not going anywhere. And as you can see, in addition to that, inside of here, we've attached the dowels with the same contact cement that we used to attach the L200. The contact cement was a recommendation by a very knowledgeable puppeteer that I've met. So we use the same thing to attach that, and you just let it dry and it stays in place. And I think that at least takes care of like the mechanics of him. You can see that Aslan can pretty easily move his head. You know what the legs look like and stuff, and I think that's a pretty good sample of kind of what it takes if you want to like create your own line. All right, that's it. Thank you guys.